The chamber was built to impress and to intimidate. It stretched high above the heads of those inside, with walls of cold silver metal and massive windows that opened into the endless darkness of space. Dozens of alien leaders sat around a great curved table, their voices sharp, their tones filled with arrogance as they spoke of war. Holographic screens glowed in the air, displaying maps of Earth, cities marked with red circles, oceans highlighted as if they were nothing more than resources to be claimed. Every word was about conquest, about how long humanity could resist, and about which alien faction would gain the most spoils. For most in the room, Earth was already a broken prize waiting to be divided. Near the edge of the chamber, away from the table, a small group of humans sat as observers. They had no power here, only the right to listen, and among them sat one young man whose presence seemed almost invisible at first. His name was Daniel, and his official role was nothing more than interpreter. He wore a plain dark uniform, with a small badge that marked him as a translator. His job was to repeat the alien words into English for the benefit of the few human diplomats present, and nothing else. He was not expected to argue, not expected to interfere, not even expected to show emotion. He was supposed to be silent, a tool for communication, nothing more. Yet silence can sometimes carry more weight than words, and Daniel's silence began to draw attention long before anyone realized it. The aliens spoke with cruel amusement. One tall figure with scales the color of rust leaned forward and said that Earth's weapons were laughable, that human armies were like children holding sticks against storms. A winged commander joined in, declaring that it would take less than a month to burn every human city to ash, and the laughter that followed echoed coldly in the chamber. Their voices rose higher, each trying to outdo the other in mocking a species they thought was weak. Some human observers shifted uncomfortably, their fists clenched under the table, but they did not speak. They knew the rules. They were there only to witness the trial of their world, not to defend it. Daniel, however, did not flinch, did not twitch, did not show even the smallest reaction. He translated the words smoothly, without hesitation, his calm tone carrying each insult in English to the human diplomats. But his face never changed. His eyes remained steady, his voice flat, and somehow that very calmness unsettled those who watched him. The alien leaders noticed. At first, they ignored it, dismissing him as a machine-like translator. But the longer the meeting went on, the more his silence became a shadow in the room. When one alien boasted that Earth's oceans would make excellent fuel for their factories, Daniel repeated the words clearly, but his expression did not flicker. When another laughed about enslaving human survivors, Daniel's voice did not rise or fall. He simply spoke the words back with a stillness that made some in the chamber shift uneasily. It was as if he had already heard these threats 1,000 times, as if nothing could surprise him. Silence should have made him small, but instead it seemed to make him larger. His presence began to weigh on the conversation in ways no one could explain. One alien general slammed a clawed hand on the table, demanding to know why the humans did not beg for mercy. He wanted fear. He wanted cries and pleas. Instead, he was met only with Daniel's level gaze as the words were translated into English. For the first time, the alien's voice cracked with irritation. Another leader hissed that humans had no dignity left to lose, that they should be grateful their deaths would be quick. Daniel repeated the sentence calmly, but in the silence that followed, his eyes lingered a moment too long on the speaker, and that pause felt heavier than any insult. It was the pause of someone who understood more than he revealed. The human diplomats glanced at him, their faces pale. They too felt it now, that something about Daniel was unusual, that he was not just a voice carrying foreign words. He seemed almost detached, yet not in fear. Detached in confidence. The more the aliens mocked, the calmer he appeared, and that calmness carried the weight of a hidden truth. The chamber, once filled with loud laughter and arrogant boasts, grew quieter as the session dragged on. The aliens had not planned to be distracted by a human interpreter, yet their eyes returned to him again and again, as if waiting for him to break, to react, to show weakness. He never did. The silence became unbearable. Finally, one alien leaned forward, its many eyes narrowing. "You," it said, pointing a long finger at him. "You are human. Why do you sit so still when your kind is being condemned? Do you not fear what is coming? Do you not understand that your planet will fall?" The question was meant to humiliate him, to provoke a reaction that could feed their pride. Daniel raised his head slightly, his calm gaze locking on the speaker, but he did not answer. He simply translated the question into English for the diplomats beside him, his voice steady, his tone unchanged. Then he went silent again. The lack of response was sharper than any defiance. It was not ignorance. It was choice. A strange tension settled across the chamber. The alien leaders exchanged uneasy glances, unsure why this one human unnerved them so much. He was supposed to be nothing, a background figure, a tool. Yet his silence had become something else entirely, an unspoken challenge, a question they could not answer. What did he know? Why was he not afraid? What power could possibly make a human so calm in the face of such doom? The meeting continued, but every word now carried a different weight. Every insult thrown at humanity landed weaker than before, because the silent interpreter had stolen the room without speaking a single defiant word. He was supposed to stay invisible, but instead his stillness had made him the most dangerous presence in the chamber. The chamber's tension grew thicker with every passing minute. The alien leaders continued their shouting, but now some voices trembled, betraying the unease that Daniel's silence had sown among them. One of the generals, green-skinned with horned ridges curling over his head, slammed a claw on the table and roared that Earth should be destroyed immediately before it could rise again, certain that humans had no hope. Another, smaller but equally venomous, hissed that no fleet, no weapon, and no diplomacy could save them from inevitable extinction. Daniel did not flinch. He did not even shift in his chair. He repeated their words in clear English, his tone calm, smooth, unbroken, yet somehow carrying a subtle weight, an undercurrent of something the alien leaders could not name. The human diplomats listened with wide eyes, feeling the shift in the air, the first crack in the arrogance that had filled the room for hours. Then Daniel did something no one expected. Instead of just translating, he added a single line, almost imperceptible at first, but deliberate. He says the humans are weak. But he forgets, humans do not break so easily. The words were quiet, yet in the echoing chamber they rang louder than any shout. The aliens froze, unsure what had happened, and the diplomats turned toward him in shock. He had broken protocol. He was supposed to translate faithfully, to remain neutral, to stay invisible. Yet his calm voice had carried a warning that no alien wanted to hear, a promise of resistance they had not considered. Murmurs spread among the leaders. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a trick of tone. Others frowned, their multiple eyes narrowing as they sensed that something dangerous had slipped into the conversation. Daniel leaned back slightly, his expression unchanged, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, watching every twitch of alien muscle, every glance of suspicion that passed between generals. It was as if he already knew the outcome of this meeting, as if the arrogance surrounding him was a fragile wall, ready to collapse with just a push. The chamber grew louder again, but this time the laughter felt hollow, brittle. One alien general barked at him to repeat the words exactly, accusing him of altering the translation. Daniel's calm voice repeated their own sentences back, word for word, but in the quiet pause that followed each translation, the weight of what he had just said lingered. Another general hissed that humans were always pathetic, that no mere warning could save them, and Daniel translated again, but in the silence before his next breath, the room felt different. Something in the way he sat, in the way he held his head, suggested he knew more than he revealed. Some alien leaders noticed it, and unease crept into their confidence. They had come expecting a translator, someone neutral, someone irrelevant, and instead they found a presence that made them doubt themselves. The more they spoke, the more Daniel's calm measured responses reflected back their arrogance, exposing cracks they had not seen in themselves. The human diplomats whispered among themselves, feeling a mix of awe and fear. Daniel's silence, his restraint, was more terrifying than any weapon. It was a signal, though none of the aliens knew it yet, that Earth was not as helpless as they believed. One diplomat muttered to another that Daniel's choice to add that single line of warning had changed the room. The aliens sensed it too. They were not sure what they were sensing, only that their certainty of dominance had wavered. Their arguments became less sharp, their boasts less confident. For the first time in the history of this chamber, their voices carried doubt. The winged commander, once hissing at humans like they were insects, paused mid-sentence, his eyes flicking toward Daniel as if the quiet man held the balance of life and death in the palm of his hand. Even the tallest of the generals, who had laughed the hardest, now shifted in his seat, claws tapping nervously on the table. Then a younger alien, eager to assert his intelligence, tried to challenge Daniel. He demanded to know how a human could speak of humans in such confidence, how one so minor could carry authority over the very empire that had crushed planets. Daniel leaned forward just slightly, just enough for his gaze to meet the speaker's, and translated the question calmly. But in his eyes was a stillness, a quiet understanding, that made the alien falter. The chamber grew heavy with tension. Each alien, even those who tried to hide it, realized that Daniel was not just a translator. He was a signal of something they could not yet see. The human diplomats held their breath. Some dared to hope. The alien leaders grew restless, whispers passing along the table in languages no human could understand, their confidence slipping with every second of that calm stare. Finally, a massive horned general slammed both claws on the table, shaking it. He shouted that humans had no power, no fleet, no hope, and that even the quiet interpreter should remember his place. Daniel did not move. He translated the words, and then added another line, soft but clear, "And yet, they will act in ways you cannot see. You have spoken freely, thinking they are weak. You are mistaken." The chamber went silent. For the first time, the arrogance of the aliens faltered completely. Some opened their mouths to speak but found words failing them. Some looked at one another in confusion. Daniel's calm silence had become a weapon, and the weight of it pressed against every alien present, making them question the very assumptions that had guided them for centuries. The room had been built to display power, to intimidate the small human diplomats, but now, under the quiet eyes of one man, it seemed fragile, like glass ready to shatter. In that moment, the audience, the human diplomats, and even the alien leaders realized that Daniel's silence was not emptiness, not ignorance, not fear. It was a warning. The quiet interpreter had already shifted the balance in the room, and the first cracks of doubt had begun. What would happen next, none could predict, but everyone knew one thing. The man who was supposed to stay silent had already spoken louder than any cannon, louder than any warship, louder than any boast or threat. The room would never be the same. The chamber had grown quiet now, but not peaceful. Every alien leader was tense, their claws and tentacles gripping the table, their many eyes shifting nervously between one another, all fixated on the young human who had begun to unbalance their carefully constructed world with nothing but calm words. Daniel remained seated, his posture straight, his hands folded neatly on his lap, his eyes scanning the maps projected in the center of the room. He had not moved from his corner, yet he seemed to command every attention, as if the air itself obeyed him. The alien generals whispered to each other in sharp, clipped tones, trying to regain authority, but each glance they threw toward him betrayed growing unease. Then Daniel spoke again, not translating this time, not merely repeating their words, but revealing facts, quietly, precisely, that no human should have known. He pointed out the weak points in the alien battle formations, the blind spots in their fleet deployments, the exact location of their secret reinforcements. His calm voice carried over the room, steady, unshakable, each revelation hitting the leaders like a silent blow. The aliens recoiled. One of the horned generals bared his fangs, his voice trembling as he demanded how a mere interpreter could know their plans. Daniel translated the accusation neutrally, and then added, softly, "You underestimate what you cannot see. Humans have always watched before they strike." The chamber fell into an even heavier silence, heavier than before, because no one had expected knowledge like this from someone who had been instructed to sit quietly and do nothing. The human diplomats leaned forward, eyes wide, realizing that Daniel's calm was not a trick or a mistake, it was strategy. They had always known humans were clever, adaptable, but they had not expected this. The aliens, on the other hand, felt the first true chill of fear. Their centuries of arrogance, their belief that humans were insignificant, began to erode in real time. Every fact Daniel revealed made them question the safety of their positions, the security of their fleets, the reliability of their own intelligence. A tentacled admiral whispered harshly to his neighbor, asking if perhaps the humans had spies, agents hiding in plain sight, feeding every move back to Earth. Another general, scales pale with shock, shook his head, muttering that no one could have known these details unless Earth had prepared something massive, something the galaxy had not seen. Daniel's eyes did not waver, his calm gaze swept the room, taking measure of every twitch, every anxious glance, every tightening grip on weapons that now felt useless. Then Daniel stood. His movement was measured, deliberate, commanding attention without effort. He stepped to the central holographic map, his fingers brushing across the glowing projections, and the room leaned in, unwillingly drawn to him. "You speak of your fleets as if they are invincible," he said softly, his voice translating smoothly into English for the human diplomats, "but you have already revealed your weaknesses." He traced the path of one secret convoy, highlighting gaps in their defenses, showing how a hidden fleet could bypass detection entirely. The alien leaders erupted in protest, shouting that no human could possibly know such things, that it was impossible, that the young interpreter was lying or hacking their systems. Daniel's expression remained serene. "I do not lie. I only observe," he said. The silence that followed his words carried a weight the chamber had never known. Every leader realized that Daniel's calm knowledge had stripped away the confidence they relied upon to intimidate each other and their enemies. The room no longer felt like a place of power, it felt like a trap they had walked into unknowingly, each alien leader suddenly aware that they were exposed. Some tried to recover, some shouted for guards to remove him, but the guards hesitated. They had been trained to follow orders without question, but even they felt it, the strange authority emanating from the human, the sense that he understood more than he should, that every word, every gesture was precise and calculated. It was not just information he shared, it was control. The alien leaders had underestimated humans for centuries, yet here was proof that they had never understood them at all. Daniel's calm, his observation, his silence, had become a weapon far sharper than any sword or cannon. And then, quietly, he added another revelation. He had already predicted the movement of several alien fleets in response to their own commands, showing where they would position themselves, where they would fail, and where they were vulnerable. A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. Some aliens drew back in disbelief, others began muttering that this was impossible, that no human could know this. Yet every line, every detail, was accurate. The atmosphere changed entirely. The room that had been filled with arrogant shouts and mocking laughter was now thick with tension, a fear that grew with every second. The aliens realized that their plans had been exposed without a single shot fired. Their voices lowered, their gestures became cautious, and their eyes continually darted toward Daniel, searching for any hint of weakness, but finding none. He remained calm, composed, a silent predator in their midst. The human diplomats, meanwhile, whispered among themselves, hearts pounding, as they recognized that Daniel's intervention had not only defended them in that room, it had turned the tables completely. The arrogance of centuries was crumbling, replaced by uncertainty, doubt, and the first true awareness that humans were far more capable than anyone in the chamber had believed. Finally, Daniel sat back down, folding his hands neatly once again, his face unreadable. The room's tension did not ease, if anything, it thickened. Every alien present understood that the young interpreter was not just translating words anymore. He was shaping the battle, directing fear, predicting moves, and showing that humans had power they refused to reveal. The chamber had intended to humiliate and mock, but instead, one quiet human had rewritten the rules without a single gesture of aggression, without raising his voice, without revealing the depth of his own capability. The first crack in the alien confidence had formed, and the shadow of that crack spread across the room, touching every mind, every heart, every belief that humans were weak. From this moment forward, the session would never be the same. Daniel's silence had become the deadliest weapon in the room, and the aliens had no idea what would come next. The chamber trembled with murmurs as the alien leaders tried to regain control, but the sense of unease had grown too strong to ignore. Daniel remained seated, his posture perfect, his calm gaze sweeping the room like a predator sizing up prey. The generals shouted and waved their claws, demanding that the human explain how he could possibly know so much, accusing him of spying, of hacking, of using some alien trick. Daniel translated their own words neutrally, and then added quietly, almost as a statement rather than a response, "Everything you have said here has been recorded and sent." A silence deeper than anything the chamber had ever known fell over the assembly. Aliens froze mid-gesture, some with mouths open, some claws poised, all staring at the human interpreter as though he had just whispered a curse over them. The implication was clear, though no one had heard the full message. Everything they had planned, every boast, every insult, every fleet position, had already been revealed to Earth. Panic began to creep into the alien ranks. A tentacled admiral's voice shook as he demanded proof, but Daniel's eyes were enough to make him pause. The human had never raised his voice, never gestured aggressively, and yet the calm authority in his stare alone communicated more than threats ever could. Whispers spread from leader to leader in alien languages too fast for the human diplomats to translate, and in those whispers were the first traces of fear that they had underestimated the creatures they had long mocked. The holographic screens in the center of the chamber flickered suddenly, and all eyes turned to see unexpected images, ships moving in sectors that had been secret, coordinates marked that no alien should have known, and fleet movements perfectly aligned with what Daniel had predicted moments before. Some aliens gasped, some hissed, some slammed the table in anger, but all knew the truth. Daniel's silence had been the signal, the calm before the storm, and now the first hints of humanity's counteraction were visible. A horned general lunged forward, claws striking the table, shouting that this was impossible, that no human could have done this alone. Daniel translated, then quietly added, "You thought you were safe. You thought the humans were weak. Every word you said, every plan you boasted, has already been shared with those who can act on it." Another alien looked around frantically, realizing that every security measure in the room had failed to prevent this knowledge from leaving their hands. Some attempted to communicate with their fleets, but interference scrambled their messages, confusion spreading like wildfire. Daniel's calm eyes met those of the alien leaders one by one, and with that small, silent gesture, he communicated a truth that no words could convey. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now they were trapped by it. The human diplomats whispered nervously to each other, their hearts pounding, as they watched the chamber descend into chaos. The alien leaders, once so proud, now argued furiously among themselves, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, who had betrayed them, how one small human could know so much. Some even accused each other, the suspicion spreading like fire through dry wood. Yet Daniel did not move, did not intervene further. His calm had already done its work. Each alien leader felt the weight of his quiet confidence pressing down, a reminder that humans were not simple creatures to be dismissed. They had underestimated the very species they believed they could destroy, and now the realization settled in like a cold shadow. Earth had been watching, waiting, and preparing, and one human had been the key to exposing their overconfidence. Suddenly, one of the younger aliens, trembling and desperate, pointed to a small blinking device embedded in the chamber wall. "What is that?" it hissed. Daniel's eyes flicked to the device, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared on his lips. He stood and approached the wall, brushing his hand over the panel. "That is your mistake," he said calmly, translating the meaning for the human diplomats. "You believed this chamber was secure. You believed your words were private. You believed your fleets were hidden. You were wrong." The blinking lights indicated transmission channels already active, sending every plan, every secret, every boast directly to Earth. The generals froze, realization dawning, terror spreading through their ranks. Their arrogance had become their undoing. The room, built to showcase power and intimidation, now felt like a trap they could not escape. Some aliens tried to regain control, shouting orders to seal communications, to arrest the human, to reset systems. The guards hesitated, uncertain whether they should obey or whether the calm figure in the corner had already decided the outcome. Daniel returned to his chair, hands folded neatly, his eyes scanning the room as if to measure the fear he had caused. The tension was unbearable. Every leader now understood that the human had not just translated words, he had exposed weaknesses, predicted movements, and demonstrated a depth of awareness that no alien should possess. It was not aggression that had made him dangerous, but observation, knowledge, and perfect timing. The chamber fell into an uneasy quiet once more, though it was now charged with panic and suspicion. Aliens whispered in low tones, scanning their surroundings for further betrayal, realizing that their plans were no longer their own. Daniel's calm, his quiet confidence, and his subtle revelations had shifted the balance entirely. The courtroom, which had been a stage for alien power and human humiliation, had been turned into a chamber of dread, and the first step in humanity's counterstrike had been taken without a single weapon being fired. The aliens had been trapped, not by armies or fleets, but by one human's knowledge, patience, and silence, and now every mind in that room knew that the outcome of this meeting would no longer be dictated by arrogance. The chamber was now a storm of whispers, shouts, and frantic movement. Alien leaders scrambled to assess the situation, claws and tentacles striking consoles, wings flaring, voices raised in panic. They had believed this session would be routine, a simple debate over Earth's fate, but now the calm human interpreter had completely overturned their assumptions. Daniel remained seated, hands folded, expression still unreadable, though his eyes glinted with a quiet determination. The human diplomats leaned forward, holding their breaths, knowing the moment had come. The holographic screens flickered again, this time showing not just positions of alien fleets, but the movement of Earth's forces, ships emerging from hidden sectors, thousands of them, perfectly coordinated, silent until the exact right moment. The aliens could see the scale of the fleet, the sharpness of their formation, and the precision of their advance. Their mouths opened in shock, some drew weapons instinctively, though they realized almost immediately that the human in their presence had already seen and predicted every possible reaction. Daniel stood slowly, his calmness now an assertion of authority. He did not shout, he did not wave his hands, but his presence alone demanded attention. "This is what you failed to see," he said, his voice steady, carrying every word clearly to the human diplomats and translating to their own ears. "You assumed weakness. You assumed fear. You assumed silence meant compliance. You were wrong. Earth has prepared." The chamber went silent, but only briefly. Then the horned generals began to argue, trying to reassert control, trying to convince each other that these were exaggerations, that no human fleet could possibly challenge their combined forces. Yet Daniel's eyes never left the holographic screens. Every prediction he had made moments ago was confirmed as alien ships moved exactly as he had foreseen, exposed and vulnerable. Every boast, every plan of conquest, every arrogant word now seemed foolish in retrospect. A tentacled admiral's claws shook as he tapped frantic orders into the control panel, attempting to reroute his fleet, but the movements were too slow. Daniel's calm voice translated alien commands neutrally, yet in the pause between sentences, it was clear to everyone that the human already understood their weaknesses better than they did themselves. He had observed, waited, and now revealed the first strike without lifting a weapon. The alien leaders felt it, the creeping realization that they were trapped not by brute force, but by strategy, intelligence, and timing. Suddenly, the holographic map expanded, showing the path of hidden Earth ships emerging from deep space, aligning perfectly to intercept key alien positions. The aliens gasped, some clawing at consoles, some muttering curses in languages long thought untranslatable. Daniel walked toward the central display, fingers brushing over the projected images, demonstrating their vulnerability. "Every fleet movement you have made has been anticipated," he said. "Every formation you thought secret has been revealed. You are exposed, yet you believe you can recover. You cannot." The silence that followed was suffocating. Alien leaders who had been the architects of countless wars now realized that their knowledge, their confidence, and their arrogance had been used against them. The human diplomats exchanged looks of awe, understanding fully that Daniel's calm had become the catalyst for Earth's counterstrike. The interpreter, once a passive observer, had now become the pivot on which the entire galaxy's balance was turning. Some aliens attempted to regain control, shouting orders to recall fleets, to hide movements, to deploy reinforcements, but Daniel's predictions continued to prove accurate. Every reaction, every panic-driven decision, fell exactly where he had anticipated. The humans watching could hardly contain their excitement and fear. They knew that in minutes, the first visible strike would begin. Daniel returned to his chair, hands folded, yet the weight of his gaze swept across the room. The alien generals, the architects of war, felt their arrogance crumble. They had thought themselves clever, prepared, untouchable, and yet here was a single human, silent for hours, revealing that their fleets were vulnerable, that their plans were no longer secret, and that their certainty had become their weakness. Whispers and murmurs spread, each alien trying to make sense of what had occurred, realizing that Daniel had not only translated words but had orchestrated fear, strategy, and exposure in ways no one had imagined. Finally, the first signs of Earth's counterattack appeared on the outer edges of the holographic map. Tiny points of light, ships small from afar, yet innumerable, moved in perfect formation toward key alien positions. Daniel did not smile, did not gesture, but the calm in his posture radiated a quiet power that filled the chamber. The alien leaders shouted, cursed, and scrambled, but every movement had already been calculated, every reaction anticipated. Daniel's quiet voice added, almost softly, "You believed silence meant compliance. You believed observation was weakness. You were wrong. Now, you will see what happens when humans act." The human diplomats watched, hearts pounding, as the first strike was about to begin, not with weapons fired in the chamber, but with the revelation of power, strategy, and knowledge that had been hidden from the galaxy for centuries. The silence of one human had become the spark that would ignite the galaxy's reckoning, and every alien present understood that they were facing something far beyond what they had ever imagined. The chamber had become a storm of fear, confusion, and disbelief. Alien leaders flailed their claws, wings, and tentacles, shouting orders to recall fleets, shield their positions, and hide the movement of ships, but it was too late. Daniel remained seated, calm, his hands folded, his eyes scanning every reaction as though he were observing pieces on a galactic chessboard. Outside the chamber, the holographic map pulsed, and slowly, steadily, Earth's ships began to appear, thousands of them, glinting in the light of distant stars. The first point of light became a fleet, the fleet became an armada, and the armada became a force that stretched across the sector, moving with silent precision toward the alien positions. Aliens froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. How had humans concealed such power for centuries? How had one interpreter known all along? Daniel's calm gaze swept the room, and in that moment, the leaders understood that the entire situation had been orchestrated with terrifying foresight. The humans had waited, hidden, silent, and now, in one calculated moment, they were ready to act. Panic erupted as the first human ships fired precise strikes at key targets. Alien shields flared, weapons fired, but every move was anticipated, every countermeasure accounted for. The holographic display in the courtroom showed alien fleets breaking apart, disorganized and confused, exactly as Daniel had predicted. Some aliens tried to flee, some attempted to reorganize, but the human forces moved like a perfect wave, overwhelming every position with intelligence, coordination, and strategy that seemed impossible. In the chamber, the generals shouted at each other, accusing one another of failure, while Daniel sat quietly translating, his calm voice amplifying the terror without raising its own volume. Every alien present now understood that the humans had not come to negotiate, they had come to win, and they had prepared for every contingency. The arrogance of the empire, built over centuries, collapsed under the weight of a single human's observation, foresight, and planning. Daniel rose slowly, his hands brushing the table, and the chamber seemed to shrink under his presence. "You assumed silence meant fear," he said, his voice steady, carrying into every ear. "You assumed observation was weakness. You assumed humans would wait quietly while you destroyed them. You were wrong." The alien leaders trembled. Even the bravest among them realized that their empire, their fleets, their carefully constructed plans, were no match for the preparation, patience, and intelligence of humans. Outside, Earth's ships continued their advance, striking precise points, disabling weapons, and neutralizing forces without mercy or chaos. Every strike was controlled, every movement deliberate, demonstrating a calm and intelligence that alien civilizations had never encountered before. The room was no longer a place of negotiation or debate, it had become the silent observation point for a galaxy witnessing humanity's return to power. Some aliens attempted to communicate with each other, but their messages were intercepted or anticipated, their orders delayed, misdirected, or rendered useless. Daniel's calm voice continued to translate, but the words themselves became a weapon, each pause and measured statement reinforcing the sense that every alien move had already been accounted for. The human diplomats leaned forward, awe and fear mingling in their expressions, as they realized that Daniel had not only revealed the weaknesses of the aliens but had also coordinated the response with such precision that victory seemed inevitable. In the chamber, the alien leaders were paralyzed by disbelief and terror. Their arrogance had blinded them for centuries, and now, with humanity's forces striking perfectly in line with the warnings of one silent interpreter, they understood fully that they had underestimated an entire species. The first alien ships exploded in distant light, and the soundless destruction echoed across the holographic display, terrifying and mesmerizing all at once. Daniel's eyes never wavered. He remained calm, silent in posture, but commanding in presence. Every alien who looked at him felt the weight of his foresight, the quiet authority that had turned a courtroom into a battlefield. Each human ship that struck confirmed his predictions, and each alien attempt to resist only proved that they were already too late. The chamber, once filled with arrogance, laughter, and mocking, now quivered with fear. The leaders realized that Earth had not come to negotiate, to plead, or to surrender. They had come prepared, patient, and intelligent, and one human had been enough to expose the entire empire's vulnerability. Finally, Daniel returned to his seat, hands folded once more, his face calm as if nothing had occurred, yet every alien present knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The humans had acted, the first blows had been struck, and the galaxy had witnessed the power of observation, silence, and intelligence. The alien generals slumped, realizing that their empire's arrogance had been shattered not by brute force alone, but by one human's foresight, patience, and perfect timing. Daniel's quiet presence, once dismissed, had become the most powerful weapon in the room, and the first chapter of humanity's counterstrike was complete. The galaxy now knew that underestimating humans was the deadliest mistake it could ever make. Silence, it seemed, was not weakness, it was a warning.